Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And here on the channel, we're making a big push currently to make a faction focus for every single faction that's dropping with the indexes. And I will admit, we're not as equally excited for all of them, but one of the ones that we are both excited to talk about are the Tyranids.
Big bugs. Well, not just big bugs. All bugs. All bugs are great and deserve to be shot.
No, the only good bug is a dead bug. I love the movie Starship Troopers, and as such, I love the Tyranids. And the point for us here is we are tailoring these videos to be short and sweet, to break down the general idea of the factions, rather than being a big deep dive. And really sort of tailoring ourselves at players who are thinking about getting into a second faction, or maybe you're new to the game, and you're looking out for your first faction, and you want to get a little taster of a bunch of them. Or maybe you're a returning player who hasn't played in a little while, and you just kind of want to see the state of things. And generally speaking, for the bugs, not a lot has changed if you're a returning player. But I think that's fine because they already fit their fluff so well. So John, I mean, let's just get it out of the way. When talking about the lore of the bugs, it is simple. There are many bugs, and they want to eat.
Yeah. Like, if you break down the lore of it extremely base level, the Tyranids are just a bunch of different bioorganisms that show up to planets to consume everything on the planet and then leave.
Yep.
But within that is a lot of different nuanced, like, individual bugs that all have their own special little weird quirks and neat things. And it's just very entertaining and exciting. And they all have different, like, guns that are different bioguns, and they've got different all sorts of stuff that you can just really dig deep into. And on the other side, if Tyranids are not so much the thing that you're, like, fixating on, and you like the idea of playing a force that is overwhelming or vaguely Lovecraftian in nature, to be the overwhelming force that someone has to overcome, that's the role they kind of fit in the setting. Is the thing that will eventually kill and destroy everything.
Yes, because truly, they are an eldritch nightmare. You know,
yes.
If these things were just little scampering animal intelligence bugs devouring whole planets, that'd be terrifying enough, right? Like, that's horrific. But what makes them the most terrifying is that while they operate with an animal intelligence if left alone, when introduced to some other specific bioorganisms, they become enslaved to a communal hive mind, where all Tyranids are sharing all of their communal knowledge all at once. The moment some bug on another end of the continent that's connected to the hive mind sees a person, every bug on that whole planet knows where that force is. And they will use that knowledge to move like a flock of birds, perfectly coordinating their assaults through a giant Norn Queen equivalent somewhere out in space that is manipulating all of the tendrils. It's horrific. And it takes them from animal intelligence to a devastatingly efficient warrior caste. And those, intelligent bugs that slave the others, they're sort of like brain bugs from Starship Troopers, if you know that touchdown. And the brain bugs are really what express themselves on the tabletop with their fluff.
Yeah.
Straight to rules.
So, best example of that is synapse, right?
Yep.
It's the first rule you're going to read when you read the indexes. And what it says is when you're within range of another synapse creature, which, think of synapse creatures as the big brain bugs, right? Your leaders, your big monsters that aren't running out and rampaging, they're sitting behind stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like your hive guard, your hive tyrants, your like neurothropes, those kind of things. And then those little gribblies that surround them are going to get buffs to battle shock, so they're less likely to break and stay together as a swarm.
Mm-hmm.
Which then follows the shadows and the warp rule directly underneath. That is also their faction rule, in that the big brain bugs are looking at this scene of what's going on, and they know when to activate a thing called Shadows of the Warp, that like gives these like harsh, weird, crazy Lovecraftian visions and presence to the enemy force, and then that kind of flips the table in game terms to make people lose them, like have to take battle shock. So you just really quickly get to do this like really cool, overwhelming force thing. It's very, very fun, and it's because these little brain bugs are making decisions.
Yeah, it is, they have this sort of psychic presence that enslaves the lesser bugs to them, and this is them using that as one big push once a game to shatter the enemy, to give them just a taste of what the hive mind is like. It's really good, and, if you position your brain bugs well, you can use this to devastating effect. But the hive mind is hyper intelligent. That's the whole reason it can do this. It is unfathomably intelligent. It is truly the eldritch nature of it. And that intelligence extends to all of these bugs that the hive mind is making. Because these things are made on the fly. As they are eating the planet, they get the biomass, they break it down, and then they immediately use it to make more bugs. And depending on what they see in the resistance of those on the planet that they're trying to consume, they'll make bugs tailor-made, bespoke, to kill you. In whatever way will do it most efficiently. These are small batch artisanal murder bugs. And that comes across in a rule called hyper-adaptations for the Hive Fleet, for the Invasion Fleet detachment. And there's a lot of words here, but very simply. At the start of your first battle round, you get to choose a type of mutation that your whole army's going to get. And there are a couple of them, but basically, you can choose for your whole force to do much, much better against infantry. You can choose to do much better against vehicles and monsters, or to do an incredible amount of damage to characters if you are fighting a force that you really need to get rid of their buff characters. And as to which one to pick, you will learn over time with some experience, but it gives you an immense amount of flexibility every time you step up to the table, which will let you get a little leg up no matter what type of opponent you're facing. Because the Tyranids are just sort of never really caught flat-footed. They're gonna react and they're gonna evolve. And it's horrific. And I hate it, just kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, but I love it. And I appreciate every Tyranid player who paints 1,000 little Griblies so that I could kill them with las guns.
Or get eaten by them. Both are fun.
That's true.
We're gonna have a good time
by Tyranids. Yeah. But speaking of little Griblies, the first data sheet that we're going to go over today is my pick for this Termagants.
Well, yeah,
right?
Because, for us, we looked at this and we can't go over all of them, generally speaking, in the format. So we're just going to pick two that are representative.
Right. Like, these are things you're more than likely going to put in your army, no matter what kind of army you're building.
Yes.
Termagants, though, are little shooty bugs that have, they're tiny little guys, tiny little guns, and they are just ready to shoot and die. But you don't bring them for their damage output. You don't bring them because they're really tough, right? You bring them because you can bring so many of them and kind of spread across the board and become roadblocks for your opponent for your big brain bugs or your big damage bugs or your shooting bugs or the things you actually want to do the damage. And you see that in their Skulking Horrors rule on the data sheet that allows you to move near things whenever they move near you to kind of gum them up as they're coming up the board. So you can get at objectives, push people away from objectives from your own movement, or keep them from being able to charge a character or a big bug, just all sorts. They gum up the works, and that's their job.
Yeah, they're meant to die. They're the swarm.
Yeah, you can buff them up when you have a huge amount of them to do a level of damage, but they're not going to be your main form of damage. They're just meat that gets eaten by the opponent's force. But every bullet that goes into Termagants is a bullet not going into your big stuff.
Yes. No one wants to have to be forced to shoot Termagants, because they're just throwaway chaff. But sometimes you gotta, if there's a big enough blob. And that's the real power of the Termagant. Mm-hmm. And, normally with a horde in a game, you would just shoot them enough to break their morale and they run. But with a brain bug nearby, not gonna happen. It's good. They're really good. You're gonna take them in almost every list.
Yeah.
And for me, if I was a wise, reasonable man, I would pick something like the Hive Tyrant, because it is like the good pick. But listen to me, there's only one way you could judge a War Scroll, and that is by how many mouths the monster has. And by my very scientific rating criteria, the Horuspex is the best War Scroll in the book. I will be taking no questions, no notes. It is the biggest, stompiest bug, and it has 18 mouth attacks. 18. It, like, look at the thing on the screen. Look at the thing on the screen. Or maybe it's over there. I don't know where we're going to put it. But look at it. It's a colossal, stompy monster bug that is nothing but mouths. And it gets 18 attacks.
And what Joe's kind of getting in here is, like, he's very passionate about this big mouth creature, right?
Yes.
With Tyranids, your big bugs are kind of where your personality is and where your strategy is going to revolve around. So pick the ones that you really like, that you want to paint, that you want to build, that you want to play with, and then build around. All of them are pretty good. There's none of them that are, like, terrible.
I mean,
so
the rest of them all only have one mouth, and thereby are terrible, John. But
okay,
I see what you mean.
Yeah, but, like, you can play with, like, the big cannon, like, bug, or, like, you can play with big mouth bug, or you can play with, like, the one that's got a ton of brains. Like, there's lots of different big bugs to choose from. But the one we're showing you today is the one with big mouth brain bug.
Yeah, it's the one that makes my, like, it made me go make ape noises when we first saw it. For me, I think this is indicative, because, I mean, generally you have, like, your little gribblies who are going to gum up the works. And then you're going to have big bugs that are sort of independent operators and threats. And this is the threat. Whereas the Termagants do not do the work, this does the work. This does all the work. God, it hits like a truck. It's fairly tough, it's fairly fast, and it's going to make the charge. And it's going to get 14 mouth attacks that hit shockingly hard. Shockingly hard. At like -1 rend, 2 damage a pop, even elite infantry, it's going to make disappear. And then it gets extra attacks from its big shovel claws, like its crab pincers, which are anti-vehicle at -2 AP, strength 14, and d6 +1 damage for each of those. And that alone would be great. But also it's got a grasping tongue to where it can snipe a enemy hero out of their unit. Like, throw out its tongue, grab them, pull them into its mouth, munch, kill their hero straight out of the unit. And all of that also triggers a special rule, Grisly Spectacle, where after it resolves its attacks, if it destroyed a unit with those attacks, each enemy unit near it who saw that terrible shit happen, it has to take a battle shock test because it's so horrific to watch everyone get mulched. I mean, they got blendered by this giant bug, and I love that. The bug is good. But John is right. There are other compelling bugs. They just have less mouths.
And the beautiful thing about Tyranids is that you can bring all sorts of different bugs.
Yes.
Right? And I think that's going to be the biggest tip I can give you for Tyranids is don't just bring like 3 Horuspexes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bring a Horuspex to do the big mouth attack.
Maybe kill the maybe kill the elite units. That's your job.
Yeah, and like bring an Exocrine to be on the back shooting at bigger targets that you can then like converge all of your fire at. Like kind of diversify a little bit with the bigger bugs.
Mm-hmm.
But like don't forget to bring the small bugs. I've seen a lot of people who like, oh, I'm gonna bring the big stompy list. It's just the big bugs, and then those big bugs don't have anything protecting them, and they get charged by a bunch of Terminators and die.
Mm-hmm.
You got to bring some small ones, whether that's gargoyles or termagants or hormagaunts. Just bring some of the little bugs so that they can keep your big bugs from just getting mulched to death by something.
Yeah, a diversified list for Tyranids, I think, does really, really well. It's an army that, like, the sum is, like, its whole is much, much bigger than its individual parts. They really work together in a beautiful concert to make a force that can be hard to deal with when played well, especially if you position your brain bugs smartly, which you will just learn over time how to do. And if you position smartly and you bring a diverse list, man, you are going to be a threat on the tabletop because you'll have an answer for most everything. And I think that sums up Tyranids nicely, but if you guys do have further questions, something we weren't able to touch in this video because we're trying to keep these short and bite-sized, feel free to reach out. All of our social medias and stuff are down below in the description, and we are more than willing to revisit a topic or help folks if you send us a message or a tweet or whatever. And we're going to be working on more of these faction focuses, if maybe this isn't your only faction you're interested in, and we'll get those out soon. For now, it's been all of our opinions, bona fide, Kentucky Fried. We'll see you all in the next one.